Your relationship with money matters. I'm Michelle Perkins, and this is the Money and You podcast, where I will be breaking down your relationship with money, offering tough love money tips, and a money dating plan that will focus on lifting the barriers to success to help pave the way for better money practices and increased wealth. It's time to take control to live a limit-free life. It starts today. Hello, and welcome to the Money and You show. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host. We have such an excellent show today. I'm not going to waste very much time before I introduce our guest, Grant Sabatier, and he is fantastic, so I'm super excited about having him on. He began a blog called Millennial Money, and it has really taken off. And when I first saw that, I thought, what's different about millennial money? Is it somehow different than, money tips and advice for people my age, for my kids' age? So I took a look at, I'm pretty big on talking about how age doesn't matter, particularly with people in career transition and giving them a hope and optimism that they can change careers at any age. So that's kind of my mantra a lot. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe age does matter in certain situations, and particularly with money. So I started looking at it, and the Pew Research Center was talking about how millennials differ from other generations in terms of money. And it is about generational differences. And when I thought about it, it made so much sense. I grew up with parents who had grown up in the Depression and world wars. And so obviously their money beliefs and their thinking around money and their habits around money were completely, unique to them because their perspective was around that. And with millennials, I found it interesting. Millennials are typically born between 81 and 1998, and they grew up having experienced the 9/11 attacks, and they grew up experiencing a serious recession. And so these things had some impacts on the way millennials hear about money, think about money. So anyway, it really made sense to me how important it is to kind of look at this generationally. So with that, I want to bring on Grant Sabatier. He's the author of the international bestseller Financial Freedom, A Proven Path to All the Money You Will Ever Need, published in 12 different languages by Penguin Random House. He's also the creator of LinkedIn Learning's Financial Freedom course, creator of Millennial Money, acquired by The Motley Fool in October of 2020, and co-founder of bankbonus.com. Dubbed the Millennial Millionaire by CNBC, Grant Sabatier went from $2.26 to $1 million in 5 years through side hustling and investing. After reaching financial independence at the age of 30, Grant founded millennialmoney.com, where he writes about investing, personal finance, entrepreneurship, and hosts the Financial Freedom podcast. Grant also speaks around the world on money, entrepreneurship, and mindfulness, which we're going to talk about. Grant has been featured in over 500 international media outlets, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, National Public Radio, Wall Street Journal, MarketWatch, The Rachel Ray Show, Chicago Tribune, USA Today, Inc. Magazine, Forbes, Toronto Star, the Sydney Morning Herald, and now the Money and You show. Grant, welcome. So happy to have you here.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, I have so many questions. So fortunately for you, there is a timeline on this podcast. I want to start a little, one of the things that I started reading and I started listening. Actually, your blog kept me up really late last night. It's super great. I loved it. So can't wait now to read it more regularly. One of the things you mentioned was money's not so complicated. And it's interesting because part of my little slogan here is your relationship with money, in fact, is complicated. So I'm just kind of curious, when you started this, what was your mindset around money? What was your relationship with money? And did that naturally lead into this? Can you give us a little background on that?
Yeah, the quick background is I grew up with parents who didn't have a lot of money. I grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., where there's quite a bit of wealth, and I was always the kid who had less money than others. My parents were always stressed about it. It was something they fought about. Money was a very present thing, and the lack thereof of money was a very present thing in my life growing up. And so from a pretty early age, I realized that money was an important part of life. And as I started getting a little bit older, I recognized that perhaps having a little bit more money in my life would give me more freedom and more options. With that being said, I went to college and studied philosophy and really didn't develop a whole lot of practical skills until I actually graduated college and bounced around a bunch of different jobs and actually had to move back home with my parents and sleep in the same bed that I'd slept in as a kid. And really, my financial journey started at the age of 24 when I looked at my parents, who, for the first time, I realized they'd gotten a little bit older. I realized some of the dreams that they had talked about when I had grown up. Not only had they not accomplished those dreams, but a lot of them they didn't even have anymore. And I started looking out over the next 30, 40 years of my working life, had no idea what I wanted to do, but did realize that I wanted to try to make as much money as I could as quickly as possible. Not to be rich, not to buy expensive things, just to have options and not limit myself in life. So, really, my relationship with money started at the age of 24 when I had none. And it was around this time that I started realizing that a lot of personal finance advice, a lot of what I was reading on the internet, a couple of books that I had read, had this flawed premise, this idea that time is money and money is time. And whenever you're working, you're trading hours of your life. And I recognized that time actually was so much more valuable than money. And a lot of this money advice that I was learning, that I was exposed to, was not only outdated, a lot of it was actually wrong, whether mathematically or it was just designed to help you maybe retire at the age of 65. So I put on my philosophy major hat and dug in and started realizing that a lot of what is being taught about money was incorrect. And so I started living a very different life than my friends, than my parents, than my family members, and recognized that if I could increase the amount that I was saving, I could potentially retire or at least get a lot more freedom in my life much sooner. And so I started learning very, very quickly, started side hustling, making money in different ways. And to your point about millennials and their relationship with money, it's a lot easier to make money today than it was even 10 or 15 years ago. And so we actually live at a time when it's never been easier in history to reach financial independence. And a lot of that has to do with just the high quality information, the high quality, low cost investing options, the amazing blueprints that are out there, and then just the internet, the ability to learn things so quickly and build online businesses and just sell on. I mean, just I'm a digital native. I got my first laptop computer when I was 8 years old. And so this is something that I was able to benefit from. And it really impacted my relationship with money significantly. But most importantly, I ended up spending a ton of time with money while my friends were going out to bars and sports games and concerts and traveling all over the world. I was spending my time trying to learn as much as I could about money. So I like to say that I have a PhD in money and I'm pretty bad at everything else.
Well, I wouldn't say you're too bad at a few other things like writing, and I have to say, I agree with you. It's an exciting world in the sense that, losing a job, for example, is not what it used to be. It was, it could be absolutely catastrophic, but now there are things that you can do to at least eat and pay a few bills while you're looking for something else. And yeah, the world has changed so much in that regard, and it is exciting to me to see all the many ways people can earn money. And I don't know if you grew up with the message that the harder you work, the more money you make, or any of that, but some of what you're saying is quite the opposite of that. Not that I'm sure you've worked hard, I work hard, we all work hard, but this idea that, there's this uphill kind of linear thing where the harder you work, the more money you make, that seems to be a holdover from times long gone at this point.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I learned pretty early on in my life was that nothing's guaranteed and nobody owes me anything. And so this sort of traditional trope of millennials being entitled and getting everything that they want, I didn't have that attitude in life. I recognized that life was hard, that it was a struggle. I saw all the sacrifices my parents had made. And so I didn't have those kind of rose-colored glasses, that I was going to be handed this sort of perfect job, and this perfect life. I knew that I was going to have to work hard for it. But more than working hard, I was actually quite lazy in school and high school, and I was really always looking for the easy way. And the easy doesn't mean, cheating or finding the side door. It's just thinking a little bit before you start something and trying to figure out, is there a different way to think about this thing? Or what is the person who hired me or my teacher, what are they actually expecting? And how can I deliver that thing as opposed to what I think needs to be delivered? I think that we have this idea that you need to work hard, your entire life, you need to make all these sacrifices. But really, at the end of the day, the amount of money that you make is more attributed to the perception of the value that you create in the world. It's not even the actual value, it's just the person who's paying you or hiring you. Do they view what you're doing as ultimately being valuable? And that's something that I learned just in terms of writing papers that impressed my professors, or when I started my own business and worked with clients, actually thinking before the project even started, what do they actually want here? What's success going to look like? And then trying to build whatever I did around that goal, as opposed to just working 100 hours a week. It's not to say that I didn't work an immense amount during this time period, but I think I was able to compound some of that work a little bit faster because I figured out exactly what people were buying from me and
Mm.
exactly how I could deliver it. So I think those are two different things.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's great. I actually loved the fact that you had the philosophy degree. I knew that was going to make you different and unique in this space. So, tell me a little about your ideas on mindfulness, because I love that that is actually a part of this conversation that you have around money.
Yeah, so I've been quite a spiritual person for most of my life. I grew up in the Southern Baptist tradition, and then moved from Christianity into Buddhism, and recognized that in a lot of ways they're not only extremely similar, it's sort of the same core set of values. And at that core set of values is recognizing that both we're all connected, and that everyone deserves a life that they love. And so when it comes to money and thinking about money, a lot of the rules around money, a lot of the systems were ultimately designed, you know, quite a while ago. But when they were designed ultimately to make money seem and appear a lot more complicated than it is. The rich get richer because the system is designed that way. And so I was poor and had no money, so I needed to figure out how the rich made money. And then once I'd made that money, ultimately I wanted to try to pull back the curtain and share what I had learned in the process to help other people realize that it's not as complicated as they are meant to believe. And that's one of the reasons I do the work that I do. I reached financial independence shortly after turning 30 in 2015. And that's when I launched millennialmoney.com, really to share what I'd learned along the journey, what worked, what didn't work, the mistakes that I made, and try to do it in as simple a way as possible so that anyone, no matter where they're at in their own financial journey, could get value from it. And one of the things I learned an immense amount from readers, they sent me questions, and I started understanding the pain points that others were having. And then I was able to adapt my own work to address those. And so money itself is only as complicated as you make it. Unfortunately, money often isn't taught in school. You inherit a lot of your money relationship from your parents, or if you inherit it from society, the society has this really backwards relationship with money, where there's this mentality of spending before saving. I mean, those
Yeah.
common tropes. But I wanted to really simplify, as I moved into that next phase of my life, a lot of these ideas, and in some ways write the book that I wish I had, when I was 22, 23, or 24, through the lens of, you don't have to live the same way as everyone around you is living. And in fact, living the way that others live is the surefire way to debt and unhappiness. And so mindfulness at the core of saving, making, investing, growing money, it's so much easier to do all of those things if you're mindful of what you actually want in life, and you pay attention to how spending money on things makes you feel, how you make money. Oftentimes in life, especially today, our intuitions are actually quite strong. And
Mhm.
when we feel stuck in our life, that means we actually are. Or when something is upsetting us at our job, we should dive deeper into that and ask ourselves why and try to figure it out. But a lot of people don't do that. They just think that they have to work at jobs that they hate, and that's just life. And you have to make that type of sacrifice. But the more mindful you are, and the more aware, the more that you know yourself, the more that you understand what actually makes you happy, it's so much easier to use life to use money to build a life that you love, as opposed to just chasing after or trying to live someone else's life, whether it's the ones your parents or your friends or your coworkers are living.
Yeah, thank you. I couldn't actually love that more because I'm fascinated by how people choose what they do for a living and how they get stuck in things that they can't stand doing. When big part of why I started doing what I'm doing because I've experienced that. And yeah, money comes into that conversation in your head in a way that creates a lot of conflict. And I love what you're saying because money should be your ally. It should support your goals and dreams and not actually be the reason that you don't pursue them. And so you see a lot of people in jobs that on paper look great and they just can't get themselves to justify leaving from a financial standpoint, but from a gut feeling, they're just sick every day going to work. And so I think, taking that into consideration and like you say, trusting your intuition and your feelings to some extent and allowing them to help you make these decisions, which leads me to a question I had. I was listening um, to you speak about your transition where were growing millennial money and then trying to kind of figure out whether you wanted to continue to grow with it or not. And it was very interesting to me because I'm hearing so many decision points and so many things that you had to consider and decide. And I'm just really curious what your process is. And, maybe it's along those lines of intuition, but there are a lot of decisions to make as an entrepreneur. And did you have a specific process for that? How did you come to those decisions?
Yeah, that's a really great question. My life, in for some reason that I can't explain, tends to operate in 5-year phases. And so I had my financial independence journey, which was 2010 to 2015, and I feel like I had my millennial money journey from 2015 really to 2020. And what I mean by that is, I don't have some hard and fast rule that every 5 years I need to make a radical shift or a change in my life. It just so happens that that's a natural framing, where after 5 years or 4.5 years, I start to um, feel like I've done what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
And the thing about me is I recognized pretty early on that I'm happiest when I'm growing and when I'm challenged and when things are new and when I'm building things and when I'm expanding as a person into new areas, as opposed to continuing to build, for example, the same thing over a long period of time. And so for me, some of that starts with the intuition. You're just you don't want to record another podcast episode, or you're not enjoying it as much as you used to, or you're tired of writing about a topic, or you feel like your answers in the thousandth podcast interview are the same soundbite that you had 2 months ago. I think naturally capitalism and creation and all of these things really work on the backs of efficiency and economies of scale. So the world kind of rewards you for becoming an expert at something and then sticking with that
Mm.
thing. It's why Susie Orman is saying the exact same thing that she said 25 years ago today. It's like
Yeah.
she's a caricature of a person, and of course that's not who she really is. She just understands what the public wants, and to do that is not only boring but exhausting, and I don't think it's sort of soul expanding type work. And so for me, I realized in a lot of ways I've said everything that I feel and think about money. I've written over 1 million words. I've done over 1,000 interviews now. I've talked with tens of thousands of readers on, my book tour. It's one of these things where I rarely have a new idea when it comes to money. And so I kind of reach the edge of my thinking and recognize, okay, is this still interesting, or where do I want to move to? What else do I want to say or share with the world? And I take the level of visibility that I have very seriously, and that responsibility very seriously. And so for me, I try to be extremely open and vulnerable about my life and where I'm at, as a way ultimately to share with readers or listeners where I'm at in my own journey. I actually don't believe in experts or money experts. All I really
Mm-hmm.
believe in is perspectives. And I'm a 36-year-old guy who's lived a pretty different life compared to a lot of people, and I spend my day thinking about a lot of stuff because I don't have to work for money, that I simply want to share what I'm seeing and what I'm going through with the hope that it might help someone else on their own journey. And then for me, that correspondingly makes my life a lot fuller and a lot richer, because I'm able to give back and be heard and be seen, and be on this life journey with now what's turned into millions of people around the world.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay. Um, which, as you speak, I keep thinking of new things, but so you managed to um, kind of amass a lot of wealth before you even set out on your journey with millennial money, correct? Yeah. So
Yep.
that's a little opposite, I think, of what a lot of people would do. Um, and I mean, would you recommend that? Would you just use that as an example of, a possible way to approach things? It's kind of unique. It's very unique.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think a lot of people don't take advantage of the freedom that they already have in their lives. And what I mean by that is, if you've been working for the last 10, 15, 20 years and you've got, $50,000 saved or a couple 100,000, you've got a decent house, you've been kind of on the treadmill, for a while, you've acquired a lot of freedom. And what I mean by that is, you have the ability, if you wanted to take 6 months off, or change to a different career, or you move from a full-time to a part-time job. I think in life it's often easier just to continue to chase something than it is to stop and look around and say, hey, am I enjoying my life? Am I happy? Is this what I want to be doing? Am I living where I want to be living? I think a lot of people just don't take the time to do that
Mhm.
because it can be uncomfortable and it can be tough, and we often only do it when we get diagnosed with cancer, or a friend of ours dies and we're forced to confront the fact that our time here on earth is limited. That sometimes shakes us into making a huge change, or going through a global pandemic. We
Mhm.
see everyone quitting their jobs now. I'm so happy with that,
I know.
because it means that people are waking up and recognizing that they don't have to make the trade-offs that they were making before, and they're being much more aware and mindful of the choices that they're making. And so, for me, I needed to get to a point where I felt free enough that I could take some of the risks and move into a different phase of my life. And it's sort of like the making money phase and then the mission driven or creator phase. I wanted to be a writer my entire life, but I was a terrible writer until I had enough money to then spend the time to write all the time and get better, for example. And so for me, I needed to save well over $1 million in investments, as well as live a pretty frugal lifestyle, to free up myself to take some of those risks that ideally I wish I would have taken earlier on. But hindsight's always 2020. So for most people, it's simply, if you do have some incredible dream, or you feel that there's some lack in your life, there's nothing better than saving up a couple $100,000 and then taking the risk and doing that thing.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we overestimate the risk,
Mhm.
um, in our lives. It's oftentimes you can always kind of go back to where you were. And it's one of these perennial things where people in the media, everyone always asks, well, what if your money doesn't last you for the rest of your life? And then it's like, oh, wow. Okay. So my worst case scenario plan is like a normal person's everyday plan. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's one of these things where everyone's like, oh, well, you're not going to save enough money, or $1 million is not enough. And it's like, okay, well, there are worse things than being 30 years old and having, $1.25 million in liquid investments. It's funny how, we often, people kind of psych themselves out over an irrational fear of risk. And so for me, expanding as a human, the more that I share, the more that I create, the more that I've just connected with others, the bigger my life has become. And that's something that I didn't feel like I could do when I was on my financial independence journey. I actually think I made a lot of sacrifices that in hindsight I wouldn't make again. I think I
Mm.
went too quickly. I think that I missed out on a lot of experiences. Your late 20s are a pretty unique time, and I spent most of that time, working and investing. Sure, now I have the rest of my life to do what I want, but I think I could have found a little bit more balance. I'm not very good at finding balance in my life. I've certainly gotten better, but that was a struggle for me on my own journey.
Yeah, super interesting because that is a little bit of a a sacrifice, but at the same time with huge benefits. So, weighing that is super interesting to look at. Oh, I love all of that. Super, super interesting. Um, so for people listening who are thinking, well, how in the heck do you put, 100, 200,000 away in savings while you're young and starting out and, working? I know you've got, you know, so much advice, but are there a couple of things that you would just, let people really just inform them of what's possible from your experience?
Yeah, there's a couple things. The first one is that the next 5 years, 5 to 7 years of your financial life are the most important.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is no matter where you are right now, no matter where you're starting from, whether you're deep in debt, whether you already have, $20,000 saved, the next 5 to 7 years are the most important. And the reason why is you can make a profound impact with just a couple of changes in your life that can set you up for life. Because that next 5 to 7 years, that money that you've saved and invested is going to compound really, based on historical averages. If you're investing in a total stock market index fund, your money should double about every 10 years. And so it can grow very, very quickly, but you have to make sure to save up enough of a nest egg or enough in savings for that compounding to mean something. And so the simplest way to do that is, a lot of times we hear that we should save on these small expenses in our life. We shouldn't get the manicure pedicure or the glass of wine or go out to movies or pay for Netflix, when in fact those small things are actually what give us the most joy in our life. And so we should actually spend money on the things that bring us joy, those small purchases, and then save money where we spend the most money. And what I mean by that is the average American spends over 60% of their annual income just on housing and transportation.
Mm.
Buying a new car, for example, is the worst thing that you can do for your financial life. Living in a house or an apartment that's more expensive than you can afford. And so simple strategies, try to live like a college kid for the next 5 years. Try to, move to a smaller apartment or a different neighborhood, or even better, rent a 3 bedroom and rent out the other 2 rooms to cover or offset the cost of your rent or your mortgage. You don't have to do that forever. Just do it for the next 3 to 5 years,
Mm.
and that money that you'll save, it's the fastest path to get to $100,000 or $200,000 by saving $500 or $1,000 a month on your housing situation and $1,000 or $500 a month on your transportation situation. So you don't have to do that forever. It's just you want to build up enough money so that your money can really start making money. And then on the other side of the coin, there actually, of course, is a limit to how much you can cut back in your life
Mm-hmm.
before, you're living in a pantry in your friend's mom's basement, like, but there's not a limit to how much money you can actually make. And so this is one of these ideas where how much money you make is actually more important than how frugal you are, because that extra money, as long as you're living, decently frugally, that extra money that you're able to save and invest can have a correspondingly larger impact on helping your money grow more rapidly. And so what I mean by that is, looking at your career and thinking strategically about, what do the raises look like over the next 5 to 10 years. Unfortunately, most jobs, maybe if you're lucky, have a 2 or 3% annual
Mm-hmm.
raise each year. Those don't really add up that quickly. That money gets spent
Right.
often, very, very quickly. But where you can make the additional money is moving into a higher demand sector, building new skills that help you diversify the things that you can do in your full-time job, picking up sales skills for most people in companies, and switching over. I read something the other day that most companies are having a hard time finding salespeople, because younger workers think that it's a bad profession. But the most powerful people in any company are the ones that are able to pair complementary skill sets like technical skills or marketing skills with sales skills. Because if you can sell things for your company or for your business, that's where you can make a lot more money, and it's an extremely useful skill set. And then the other thing is, I'm a huge fan of just diversifying income streams, starting small with a side hustle in a way that you can learn new skills, meet new people, and use it not only as a way to make a little extra money to invest. All the money that I made side hustling went right into my Vanguard account,
Mm.
into my investments. I never spent it. The whole point was to get more money to invest, to grow. But also, side hustling is the perfect way to move towards that job that you could end up really loving. And so, if you really like brewing beer or
Hmm.
making wine or climbing on the weekends, or move toward that by starting some small side hustle in that industry to start making connections and making a little bit of extra money. You have to move towards the life that you want. That's how you're going to get there. And then the other thing is, there are a lot of people out there too that really love their jobs and are really happy, even though they don't have a lot of money saved. And I think it's also important in your life to, ask yourself if you've already won the game. And there are a
Mm.
lot of people out there that think having more money, will make their lives a lot better, when what they seek they already have. It's just money is something that culturally, is easy to chase and run after.
I love that. That's one thing I was going to ask you about is what about the teachers and the nurses and the creatives out there who do love what they do, um, and but also want to have, at some point, the luxury of buying the homes they want and traveling, and so yeah, super interesting. I love that comment about just looking at maybe do you have more abundance than you might have even otherwise. I've read, I think I talked about it last time on the show, but I think it was $95,000 where above that point your happiness doesn't actually increase. It was very interesting. Um, but of course, it does lead to freedom to have more money and options, like you're saying. You you talk about retire early, financial independence, and retiring early, and um, I was just curious, what are you thinking with respect to retire early? I mean, retirement to me is, I'm not sure I would ever want to retire. I would want to do a lot of things, but what are you talking about with that?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of retirement either. And actually, the whole entire second chapter of my book is built around the fact that retirement is actually dead.
Yeah.
This idea that, you're going to work till you're 65. Millennials don't want to do that. We want to love our lives. We want to stay engaged. We want to do things that make us happy. So let's just get rid of this idea of retirement, and then think about money in a different way. So how much money do you need to live the life that you want today? And then how much money do you need to live that same life for the rest of your life? And so building your life around that, as opposed to reaching some, destination in the future where you can check out and just chill in a hammock all day. I can tell you, I've spent a lot of time in my hammock in my backyard, and it gets old very quickly. And I by no means will want to ever traditionally retire. It's just something that the fire movement, what I'm a part of. It's sometimes hard for the mainstream media to wrap their head around, and so they had to attach this retire early component. And a lot of the early fire followers were actually boomers who, when they were thinking about retiring early, it's like retiring at 55 versus
Right.
66, or 59 as opposed to 66. This idea that you could actually retire when you're 30, or reach financial independence when you're 30 or 35, that's something that was introduced by Joe Dominguez and Vicki Robin in the book Your Money or Your Life in 1992. And so that's something where increasingly younger and younger people are realizing that retirement isn't the goal. Let's build our lives in a little different way, and just throw that idea out the window. But the financial industry, unfortunately, is still built around this old school idea. And so what you have to do is take some time to break that down for people. Most retirement calculators don't even work unless you've entered an age that's over 55, for example. So I built one that you could be 26, and it actually
Nice.
works. So these are some of the things I don't think our culture is ever going to catch up, but I'm thankful and excited to see that so many more millions of people around the world have thrown that idea of retirement out the window.
Yeah, thank you. I actually didn't know that, and it's super interesting to me because I do think it should be thrown out the window. I see people, a little older than me, but close to my age, talking a lot. It's so stressful. It's, first of all, you've got to feel like, this 65, this age, you've got to have a certain amount. That's stressful in itself. But the people I see who are actually about to retire, trying to figure out what to do with themselves, and kind of panicking about what the next phase is going to be like, because there's so many expectations. You're supposed to be in that hammock. You're supposed to be traveling in the RV. You're supposed to be doing all these things, and they don't really know what they want to do at this point. So
Yeah,
it's,
it's very hard at the age. My father's dealing with this now at the age of 65, and he's getting ready to retire, and he doesn't know what he wants to do. And we talk about this a lot, and it's really hard, at that age, after you've lived a certain type of lifestyle, to start fitting new things in. You're pretty set in your habits and your dreams and your goals. And so, some younger people, my readers and followers, if you throw that idea out the window, you can start taking risks a lot earlier, and
Mhm.
that type of jump. You just don't have to make it, because there's not that end goal in
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of being able to take risks earlier, because really a lot of them should. And the people I'm thinking of right now, they did not take any risks. They stayed at something, 40 years so that they could hit this retirement and have the pensions. And yeah, just not an appealing option, I think, to newer.
And
New,
it's scary. I mean, you have, like anything in life, when you make that change, it's going to be really uncomfortable for a while,
hmm
and that's just part of the journey. I mean, you have to recognize going in that you're going to be depressed for a while. It's going to be hard. It's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows, but you got to move through that into something else. It's kind
hmm
of like you need to create enough space in your life for something new to show up.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's very important. And just like, you were talking about the pandemic and how everybody's rethinking their lives and taking that time. I always felt that way with people, even when they're laid off. I mean, they're sad or, hurt or whatever. And in my mind, I'm thinking, this is so exciting. You're going to get a chance to stop and actually think about what it is you're doing and what you want. So those opportunities are rare, and they shouldn't be. And I think you seem to have that down, where you're sort of regularly rethinking. And
Yeah, I mean, the only constant in life is change,
yeah.
and so we know this. And so if you can align yourself with that change and not hold on too tightly to who you were previously, new things start showing up. You surprise yourself, and your life evolves in a very different way than you could ever imagine. I always recommend people just go back and read an email that
hmm
you sent to someone 3 years ago, and you won't even recognize your words. we're changing even without us knowing it. Of course, sometimes, my beard's getting a little grayer, like we see ourselves changing, but our minds are changing a lot faster than we realize, but we're trying to hold on to some version of ourselves that often no longer exists. And that's where the
Mhm.
friction point, if you've got to do all that work that you've been putting off for the last 40 years, it's like the train doesn't stop, immediately. It takes time. And in fact, usually it's going to take, uh, half a year for every year that you've been working to kind of decompress.
Mm.
I had an immense amount of sort of, I call it corporate detox when I left the working world. It took about a year and a half for me to kind of unwind, and a lot of the skills that I'd used to get where I wanted to go were no longer useful.
Right.
And so you have to build kind of a new skill set, and it's tough. I mean, there's no easy, there's no, I've looked, there's no side door to doing that work. And so being mindful, and the sooner that you can start it, and the better your relationship with money.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, your relationship with money changes as you change, and so it's important to pay attention to that.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. It's true. It's a relationship, so it's evolving all the time, and so you've got to stay in touch with it and see where it's going, and make that relationship work. I wanted to ask you about bank bonus. Am I getting that term right? You want to tell
Yep.
us a little about what that is?
Yeah, so I love building things. I can't not be building things. And so I love building websites. And after Millennial Money was acquired, a couple months afterwards, I started getting the itch just to build something new. And so, for 2 or 3 hours a day, I work on a new website that I launched called bankbonus.com, which is, we live at a time now where interest rates are just absolutely terrible. We all know this. And so, your bank, even sitting in a high interest savings account, you're making like $5 for every $1,000 you have in your savings, in a best case scenario in a year, which is pretty much nothing. Your
Yeah.
banks are using your money, and investing it and getting rich, but not passing on those returns to you. But banking has become an incredibly competitive space. And so banks are looking for new customers, and they're increasingly willing to pay one-time cash bonuses for
Mm.
opening an account. And so if you're looking for a personal checking or a business checking or a savings account or account for your child, you can often get between 500 and in some cases $2,000 to $3,000 in cash from a bank just to open an account with them, because they're looking for customers. So bank bonuses built around helping you find those cash bonuses from banks. Right now, if you open up a private wealth account, with Citibank, for example, they'll give you $3,500 in the
Wow.
first 60 days. And
Wow.
so we make it easy to find those bonuses. And because you can't get any interest on your money, at least get that cash bonus, or be aware that it's there for you to get. And a lot's happening in the banking space too. Is so many new companies, so many new challenger banks. It's an incredibly exciting time in the banking sector, where there are so many incredibly customized companies now. If you're a freelancer or a side hustler, there's banks that are built just for freelancers,
Mhm.
and all the invoicing and
Hmm.
everything that you would need is all baked into the bank account. And a lot of these companies, the public doesn't even know about. And so we profile those, and talk to the CEOs, and help people, give people new options beyond just the 4 or 5 big banks in the U.S.
Great resource. That's fantastic. Yeah, congratulations. And I'm excited to know about that. That is really fantastic for people. And yeah, the banking industry is interesting. It's going to be, I'm sort of excited to see where it goes, because it's all going to change. But um, that's great. Thank you. And your financial freedom book is your sort of synthesis of everything that you studied and learned on your own. Um, I would highly recommend that. And anything, a final money tip, or anything? It doesn't have to be about money. It can be a little more philosophical if you like. But how would you like to leave this audience at this point?
Yeah, two simple things. A lot of times, it's hard to get where we want to go because we're not tracking the right things. And I often see this time and time again where, yes, your salary is important. Yes, your tax rate is important. Yes, your mortgage payment number is important. But the two most important numbers in your financial life, the first one is your net worth, which I'm sure you've talked about, your assets minus your liabilities. Download an app like mint.com or Personal Capital and connect to your bank account. Start tracking your net worth so you can see how much you're actually worth once you take all of your assets and minus your liabilities. That is your financial scorecard. One of the things, once you start tracking your net worth with an app like Mint, which is completely free, it becomes incredibly addicting to save and make more money. It becomes like a video game where you start seeing your balances go up, seeing it all in one place. You start seeing the benefits of your hard work. It's a lot easier to make sacrifices and trade-offs. So tracking your net worth through an app like Mint is essential. And the other one is your savings rate, which is just the percentage of your income that you're saving. This is the first question I often ask people. Well, what's your savings rate? 99% of the time, they don't know. They might know that they save $500 a month or, 1% of their salary in their 401k. But your savings rate is the amount of your income that you're saving. And that number actually is directly correlated to how fast you can reach financial independence. So in the US before the pandemic, the average savings rate was about 3%. Which essentially, if you're saving 3% of your income, you're never going to be able to retire. Never going to have enough money to last you for the rest of your life. Let's say that instead of retirement.
Yeah.
If you can save 5 to 10% of your income, you can reach financial independence in about 20 to 25 years. If you can save 25% of your income, 25% savings rate, you can reach financial independence in 10 to 20 years. And if you can get that number up to 50%, which sounds absolutely crazy probably to you right now, and just for perspective, I was saving 82% of my income from 2010 to 2015. Wow. 82%. I drove an $800 car. I lived in a $700 a month apartment. I lived like a college kid, even though I was making $300,000 a year with my business. And the only reason I did that is so that I could do whatever I wanted for the rest of my life. I don't recommend that you go that crazy. I don't recommend that you live like I lived. But if you can save 20, 30, 40%, you can reach financial independence in 10 years or less. And so tracking your savings rate and your net worth, those are the two most important numbers that most people don't track and are the key to reaching financial independence.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. Yeah, great advice. And I'm not sure I know my own savings rate. So yeah, call me out on that one.
Get after it.
I am now, and I'm going to continue to follow you and read all your material because it's super great. So thank you so much for being here. It was truly a pleasure. And I wish you all kinds of luck going forward with everything and your life that is wide open with whatever you want to do going forward because of the way you set it up. So
yeah, thanks, Michelle. I really enjoyed our time today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, well, audience, thank you for listening. I'm so happy you're here, and please subscribe to the Money and You Show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast information. You can reach out to me at limitfreelife.com. I'd love to hear from you. Love to hear some of your money questions, career questions, and we are here every Monday, broadcast by ubngo.com, Monday nights at 7, streaming live, and then all over the place after that. Okay, have a wonderful week. Oh, tough love money tip. Oh my gosh, I almost forgot. I'm just going to piggyback right onto what Grant was saying and say, right along with me, figure out your savings rate. So this week, every week we have a money tip. If you do all these money tips, 52 during the year, you're going to be way ahead of the game. So go ahead and spend some time figuring out your savings rate this week. Okay, thanks so much. See you next week.